I guess we're live. Hello. I hope we are. Live coding. Gonna live code Tic Tac Toe and rock, paper, scissors in React. React using Vite and not using any TypeScript. This is going to be a tutorial for beginners, people who are just starting out with React, people who have just learned some basics of web development and want to get into building small applications like a simple tic-tac-toe game or rock, paper, scissors. So stay tuned if you want to see how we build these apps. Let's see, do we have people already watching? I'm curious. Let's see what the chat says. Hey there, say hi. Hey there. Say hi when you are new to the stream. Smiley. Send. So if you've just joined the stream, drop a message, say hi, so I know I'm not alone, not all by myself. So we can have a conversation. You can ask me things. You can tell me to show something again or explain something again when I'm going too fast. I think I'm going to start with Tic Tac Toe first. So I'm going to create a entirely new React app from scratch, and we'll see how to set up Tic Tac Toe. This is also my first stream, so I'm curious to see how this is going to work out for me. Falk has joined the stream. Hi, Falk. Nice to have you. In case anything is not set up properly, like if you can't hear me, tell me. I'm assuming it works because I can see my mic input does jump up and down, but maybe there is still something not set up properly. So making sure that you can see and hear me. And I think I could switch my screen to split screen so we can see what I'm going to do in just a second. We'll have a preview on the left side. We'll have our code on the right side so we can just immediately see what we have done in our code editor. I'm going to use VS Code. It's my editor of choice. And I think I'm going to leave Copilot. Am I going to leave it on? No, I'm not. I'll disable Copilot. Disable completions like this. So we'll do everything by hand. I'm actually ready. I'm ready to set up a project. Let's see, npm. Usually, like, this is not a production app, right? So we are going to use TypeScript for this project because this is a beginner project. We're just going to use React. We're not going to use any framework like Next.js or what have you. We're going to use plain old simple React. We're going to use Vite for setting up a React project, and yeah, that's it. So pretty basic actually. And I'm gonna use npm for that, so not any other uh, package manager like pnpm, which I would prefer, or maybe bun as well. But we're gonna use npm, and we're going to create a new app with Vite at latest. See what this does. Project name. Let's call this Tic Tac Toe. Like live coding, maybe. Let's use let's use React, and let's pick JavaScript with SWC, which is faster. So we've already made clear we're not going to use TypeScript, so the only option is actually between JavaScript and JavaScript SWC, and SWC is just a faster way to compile your JSX. Babel is slower, or Babel, and the speedy web compiler is just faster and results in a faster experience, developer experience. So we'll go with that, and then we're gonna cd into our Tic Tac Toe live coding project and open this up. Yep, we trust the authors because we are the authors. So I'm not going to go over the project setup. If you're totally new to React, you'd have to watch some other videos beforehand, because I'm not going to explain how this is set up such that it works. I'm just going to dive right in and add the code that we want to build, that we need to build Tic Tac Toe. And for that, I'm going to use the app.jsx file and actually delete most of it, because, well, you can first, we can't run it. We have to npm install first all our packages, because that's something that create doesn't do. It only spins up your, like, it scaffolds your project, but it doesn't actually install your packages. So you have to do it yourself. npm install real quick, and then it's done, and you can now go ahead and say npm run dev. That's going to spin up your app, and there it is. Now we have the basic project and some basic markup right there. But we are going to need most of it, and let's just get rid of everything. So let's get rid of our state as well. No logos, no state, that's all gone. And now we have nothing. Just to make sure that it's gonna still say hello world, at least if we put this in. Yes, it does. So it's even centered. So we still have some styles somewhere. I mean, we are importing a CSS file here, so there are some styles that are still applied to our elements, like root, that would be text center, and that's probably why this is centered. But I don't mind. I actually don't mind leaving these styles in. We can tweak them, we can tune them or delete them as we wish, but now I'm going to leave them as is. Righty, let's see. So what do we even want to do? Like, let's just keep somewhat of a mental map of where we want to go. So we want to build Tic Tac Toe, right? We want to build Tic Tac Toe. Typing's hard. And for that, we need something like a grid. So that would be the basic thing. We need a grid, and we need a 3x3 grid, right? So that's kind of the minimum requirement for playing tic-tac-toe. Okay, so we have a grid. Then we can think about what this grid consists of. So what is the individual item within that grid? Is it like paragraph? Is it like a div? And like at this point, I think I know that I'm gonna need a button. So we're going to have 9 buttons, 1 for every place in the grid. So 3 by 3 grids is 9 items. So every item is going to be a button because we actually want to click on that, on that grid's place on that item and have it do something. And clicking things usually is done with buttons. So that's why I think we need to go with buttons, which is an easy choice and obvious enough, I think. So, hey, Kai's joined the stream as well. Nice to have you here. Hello, Kais. So what else? We have a grid. We have buttons within that grid. What else? We need, what else do we need? Like we can click those buttons. What's going to happen with the click? We need a way to change players. So somehow make players take turns, like X or O, right? So if you set your mark, it's your turn, you set your mark, then it has to change kind of automatically. And then the next player is going to place his mark, and then it's going to change again for the next player. So this somehow you need a way to change our marks. Great to see me live on YouTube. Thank you. It's my first stream. I hope I'm not going to screw this up too much. Somehow make players take turns. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, next thing. We need somehow to know who won. Like if you have 3 in a row or like in a column or diagonally, obviously with the same mark, then you win the game. How do we make that happen? Let's just note that we need to determine a winner, right? And when we do determine who won the game, we need to display that as well. Display the winner. Okay. And I think one last thing we do need as well is a reset button. A reset, button. Because we need to somehow reset the game to start over when one game is done, or like what does done mean? Done can mean one player won the game or nobody won the game. So it was a draw and you need to reset the game in that case as well. Are we going to be seeing some next JS live action sessions too? Maybe. It depends on how well this session goes. So if this goes horribly, then probably not too soon. But yeah, why not? Like Next.js is where I'm most comfortable in coding. So I'd rather code in Next.js, to be honest, than in plain basic React. So yeah, I would like to do that in Next.js project. Why not? But for now, we'll keep it simple. We'll just stay on top of old React and not make things too complicated. So we don't have server components, client components, none of that routing stuff and data fetching logic, what have you. Just real simple, beginner-friendly tic-tac-toe app. Okay, so this is our guide, if you will, to where we want to go. This session is going to be awesome. I hope so. Let's make it awesome. Make this awesome. Exclamation mark. What do we need? How do we start? Like, what would be the first thing that kind of would be the first or obvious choice to begin with? Obviously, the reset button wouldn't make much sense if you don't even have a grid yet. So I think the first thing is the grid, right? So we need to somehow display at least something, something else besides this text. Let's make this Tic Tac Toe. Well, actually, let's render out an h1 tag first and make this not capital. There we go. Close it. It's not doing that by itself. Why not? Oh, yeah. Let's make this Tic Tac Toe, right? And then right below it, let's make the grid appear. So for the grid, we could start off with an array, and I'm not going to make this complicated either. So I'm just going to make a simple, let's call this initial, like initial state grid or something, state grid, what have you. And not to make this too complicated, I don't want to, like, we are probably going to use objects, but we're not going to nest too much, like an array within an array, doubly 2D array or something. So now we're just going to have a linear array with objects in it, which is not going to look like a 3x3 grid. But it makes easier working with that state. Well, it's not a state yet, but we are going to make it a state eventually. So this is just going to be the initial start out empty grid we want to display. And for that, I'm going to introduce an ID and set it to 1 and introduce a kind of, say, mark that is not set yet. Right, so make this format and let's copy, paste that a couple of times. Oh, need a comma, got that, format, and copy this as well, like 3 more times. Then we have 9 items, just what we want. Change the IDs. And now we have something resembling a grid. Well, not yet. It's just a linear array, but we can do this. We can say initial grid map. And then for every, let's call this item for now, we will, remember, we said we want to make buttons, right? So this is a place where we can actually create our buttons. And the content of our buttons is going to be the mark itself. So if there is already an X or an O in it, item.mark, so this is right here, then we want to display it. And if there is nothing yet, we're not going to display anything yet. Cool. Save. And we have our 9 buttons. No content yet, but if we choose to say X here and we save, it does actually appear. So it's not yet clickable. So you're not setting your mark by clicking the button, but you can actually display content in here. Like if you say an O at ID 6, then it does display it correctly at least. So that's just to make sure things work as expected, right? But this does not look like a 3x3 grid, right? This is just a linear representation of our linear array, right? And I'm very lazy as far as CSS goes. Actually, I'm not even touching CSS if it's not Tailwind. So Tailwind is fine by me, but I'm not going to touch the actual CSS only if I need to. Like in the most serious of cases where there is no way to do something any other way, then yeah, I'm going to write CSS. And so I'm going to choose an easy and lazy option to create a 3x3 grid without CSS. Now, actually, I'm kind of surprised to see that nothing is complaining here, because we did not add a key prop. So this does pop up in our developer console. We did not add a key prop, which I would have expected that will get yelled at this point, but we don't. I'm surprised. Actually, it should say something like you're missing a key prop. Did I disable something by mistake? Actually, no, I didn't. It's all set up by Vite. I haven't done anything. Weird, but let's just add a key prop and say this is going to be the item ID, which is why I added the ID in the first place. So the only reason why I added the ID is for mapping over our grid and using it as a value for our key. So now save, open developer console and reload our app, and now our errors are gone, right? Just what we want. Nice. Now let's get to it. Without CSS, let's add line breaks. We are going to need to wrap this into something else, like fragment, let's say. And we'll have a fragment down here. Why? Because I need to add a line break below the button. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes I will need something like this. Break. Just to make it appear, I'm going to save it. It's not going to look the way that I want it to look. But just to make sure that you see what the break does, it creates a new line, right? So the button is kind of a block element. Well, it's not really, it's still inline, I guess. But that way we have every button below the other one. So this is kind of what we want. But we only want these line breaks to happen after 3 items. So not after every iteration of our array, but only when, say, our index equals, let's see, 0, 1, 2. So if it's 2, I want to add a line break. Let's see what that does. Save. 1, 2, 3, line break. Looks good, right? So let's copy that and say after index 3, 4, 5, after the 5th, I'm going to add another line break. What do you know? We have a 3x3 grid. Now it still doesn't look great, but it is a 3x3 grid, right? So this is the lazy option without CSS to do something like this. And actually, I am going to touch CSS a little bit. Let's locate our button style. There it is. There it is. Button. I want to add a height of 50 pixels and a width of 50 pixels. Oops, save. Yeah, looking much better now, isn't it? Yeah. If we wanted, we could add padding more. Isn't this already doing some padding? This would be the X and this would be the Y axis. Right. What if we did this? Ah, see. I think we need something like margin, maybe. Margin 1 pixel. Well, actually, probably something like 3. 2? Yeah, 2 is much more. Yeah, 1 or 2. I'm gonna with 2. Right. There we go. We have a grid 3 by 3 and without actually doing much in CSS itself. So I think we can cross this off. 3 by 3 grid, done. 9 buttons, done. Save. What else? We need to somehow make players take turns. So whenever you have interactivity, you need to think of state. Because to make websites interactive, you need to track progress somewhere. Something changed, right? Because you interacted with it, something changed. And every change is reflected in a state, right? So you need state. Import use state from React. There we go. And then we're going to add a state variable in our app and call it, what do I need a state for? So in our case, we have players that take turns. So we have player X and player O. And whenever player X made their mark, we need to have player O take turn and then set their mark O and then X and then O and then X. So you need to kind of track what the current mark is set to or which player is currently playing. Yeah, yes, actually call this player. Why not? Player, set player. And let's make this a state. Good. State right there. And now our buttons don't have an on-click event yet. So let's create an event. And for now, we can just use inline function. We could create a function outside and then pass it in. But for now, I'll just use an inline function here and pass in actually, we need something else because if I want to set a mark, do I want to set a mark right now? Actually, player, let's do this differently. We need a field state, to be honest, a grid state or a field state, right? Set field state. So I'm going to approach this a little differently. I am not going to have the players take turns for now. I'm going to do this later, but for now we are going to implement a changing state of our grid. So this is our initial state, if you will, and we can pass this in actually as our state, and field state now is initially this, which is empty, right? And we can display that here instead of displaying the initial grid like forever. We are going to display what the state looks like right now. Initially empty, but whenever we click on one of these buttons, we want a mark to be set as a result. Okay, so I think this is easier to do for now, and then we are going to make players take turns, right? So yeah, I think that's easier. We do need an unclick still. So whenever we click a certain field, we want to make sure that we pass. Actually, let's create a function. handle at mark or something. Handle at mark, and this is going to be a function. So, and in that function, which is going to be called onClick, I want to set our field state to a new state. And I'm going to do that by mapping over our current state. And for every item, or let's say box, I will have to decide if this is the box that was clicked. So someone need to know, I need information whether this is the box that was clicked on. And I think we need to be passed an ID here. Yeah, let's pass an ID. And actually, we'll have to turn this into a, like wrap this into another callback. Why? Because we need to call this function and give it the ID of our item. So item.id, that's the item of that's the ID of the current item being rendered. And that way we know which button has been clicked, because the first button is going to have the ID 1, right? The second one's going to have the ID 2 and 3 and so on. And that is the info we need in order to decide which button has been clicked. And we can map our state to have a cross, say, in the middle, if we do click it. So we can check box ID. If it is actually the one that we clicked, then we will do something. Let's make 3 question marks. And otherwise, we're going to leave the box by itself, like untouched, right? So what do we have to do at this place, at this point? Let's see. This is an object. So every item in the list is an object. And we need to keep that data structure. Like we don't want to put in things that are suddenly a string or a number. We need to keep this an object, right? So the new item is going to be an object with all the attributes that it already had, which is why we spread those out into a new object. So now we have, let's say it's ID 5, then we'd have the ID 5 in the new object, we'd have mark undefined in our new object, but we want to change something. We want to change our mark attribute by setting it to, let's say X. Let's hard code X for now, right? So whenever we click a button, we want to update our state depending on which box was clicked. And if it is this box that was clicked, then we make sure that we put an X into it, and all our boxes are going to be left unchanged. So let's try. Right, so that happened. That worked as well. That worked as well. So we can now set X's in every box. Now there is still a glitch, as you can see. When I place an X in the middle, then we somehow get this weird offset, which doesn't look good, but actually I don't care. If you have any suggestions, you can let me know. But I'm concerned with the logic for now, so I'm not going to touch any CSS here. Remember, I took the lazy route for structuring my grid, so there is literally no CSS that I actually wrote myself. Not much anyway. Okay, so we have a click event on our buttons, and we can set X's everywhere, or we can set O's everywhere if we so choose. And we can still override previous choices, which is not a thing. We don't want to do that. So that's something we have to take care of later. Maybe we can somehow make this a separate point. Prevent overriding previously set marks. So we don't want to override the other player's choice to place his mark here. Then we're not allowed to override. So this is something we have to add as well. Okay. So let's see how we can make this change. For now, it's hard-coded. It's just an X or an O. That's not what we want. We want to make this dynamic. So one player starts, then he sets his mark, and the other player sets their mark. We need to make this change dynamically. And whenever you need to change something, it's most certainly going to be a state in some way, some kind. So now we can create our player and set player state variable. Let's set this to X initially. So the first player, whoever it is our player who places the X mark. Good. So now we can say this is the player and see if this still works. So this should set an X now every time. Yep, that does work. But now it is a state. So it's not hard-coded anymore. It's a state. Good. How do we make that change? Well, we call set player. Set player. Where do we call it? I think we can do it right here. We can say set player and then, yeah. How do we do that? So remember, X is first, then comes O. How do we set this to be, like we could do this, we could set player to O, but the problem is that first you do set an X somewhere, and the next thing that happens is that you set your player state to be O, which does work, but now it stays O because this is called over and over again on every click, and it just sets it to O, and it's going to stay O. That's not what we want. We want this to change dynamically back to X and back to O every time. So how do we do that? If you have heard of ternary expressions, if else, basically, then now is a good time to put this to good use. We can check if player, whatever player is, it's either X or O, and if it is X currently, then we want this to be O next time. And if it is not X, then we know the only other thing it can be is O. So if player is O, what do we want to change it to? We want to change it to X. It's actually that simple. Let's see. Reload, place a mark X, next one is O, next one is X. What do you know? See? Now it changes every time. And now we have added a state that tracks our progress through the game. We have added another state that tracks the player and the mark, and we can tick off some things here. Somehow make players take turns. Yep, done that. Now we can see if we can, oh yeah, so this is fun. If I place my mark here as the player X, and now it's player O's turn, he can actually just override my mark. And we don't want that, because now we have players fighting over the first turn, which is silly. Let's make this Where do we have our buttons? There. So let's make our button, what do you call this? Like not react. Let's make it be disabled, right? There is literally an attribute that is called disabled on HTML items. And we can set it. Come to think of it, there is an area disabled as well, which you should prefer over disabled, because if you use disabled, screen readers are not going to see the button anymore. It's just going to disappear. It's going to vanish. So whenever you say disabled, screen readers don't even see those elements, which is not really accessible. So you should use area disabled, then screen readers can still see these elements. But for now, to keep it simple, we'll use disabled and make this a condition. We can say something like, you are only disabled when that button has already been clicked and a mark has been set, right? So if the item already has a mark, item dot mark, if it's actually set. So if mark, like if it has X, right? Or if it has O in it as a value. So in either of these cases, I want this button to be disabled. And you can see it right here. It's disabled. I can't reset it to anything else. And the same thing goes for any other choice. Like choose this button. We can't edit it anymore. It's disabled because a mark is set for that element. This is more explicit. So for beginners, I would prefer having that. But this is also fine. And it's actually the same thing. Let me comment this out. If we say item.mark, we are using the truthy logic, Boolean logic, which checks the mark for its value. And if it's undefined, it's going to say it's false. But if you do have something set like O or X, then there is a value in that string, and that string has a length, and that is going to yield a truthy value. And so this is going to be true, and disabled is going to be on. So this is the same thing. Maybe it's easier to read, but for beginners, I think this is more explicit. It makes more sense. It's not exactly the same thing, technically, but it does. In our case, it does the same thing. Yeah. So let's keep this more explicit form. Now what? We need to what else? We prevented this. Let's check this off. We need to determine a winner. This is going to be a bit more complicated. So the win state is the most complex of the entire app. But we'll get there together. Hang in there. We're almost done. So the first question is, where do we actually do that? Where do we make sure to place our code that determines a winner? There aren't many places we can place that snippet of code. So what if we wanted to do it here? Like, can we check for winner here? Is that actually, like, is that a good thing to do here? Is it even possible to do it here? And if you know React and if you know how state works, the answer is no. Why? Because updating the state did not happen yet. These are asynchronous calls. Set field state, set player is asynchronous, which tells React, look, next time you re-render this component from top to bottom, which simply means running the code again, re-rendering, runs the code again, and then displays the new JSX. But the state did not update yet. This only told React, look, this is your state for the next time that you re-render. Look, this is your new state for the player next time you re-render. So here, we don't even have the information how our state, what our state looks like, or whose player, which player is next. So we are still missing information at this point, which is why we can't determine a winner here. Can't. Just technically not feasible. It's probably not impossible, but it's just not feasible. A better place to place our win logic would be, say, either here or below that function, so it doesn't make sense whether we place it, so we can check. We can check for win here, or we can check for win here, so it doesn't make much difference. Let's say we place it up top here, check for win. And I'm going to make a function just to keep it encapsulated, this block of code. Function check winner, or check for win. And then we are going to call this function here. Right? So we define this function up here, and we call this function down there. We could have done this the other way around because functions are hoisted up anyway, but this does make sense. How do we actually check for a win? So let's think. We have a grid. What are the different ways someone can win? Well, one way to win a game is if we have 3 in a row. Either the first row, the second row, or third row. The same thing goes for columns. First column, second, third column. If you have a mark like this, then you won, right? And the same thing goes for rows, you won. Okay, and of course diagonally as well. You have one diagonal and the other one, so you win. So you actually have a finite amount of win states, and we can write them all out. Let's make a comment. So check rows, and then let's just collect the different indices of when we can actually win. So we can win if we have placed a mark at index 0, index 1, or index 3, right? If these 3 buttons actually have your mark, then you won. So 0, 1, 2. 0, 1, 2. Great. What else? Well, we can win if we have the second row, like 3, 4, and 5. 3, 4, 5. Sorry, 3, 4. Like this. And of course, 6, 7, and 8. So these are indices. This is not the ID, so don't mix this up. I could have started with 0 as well, but I on purpose did not start with 0 because I don't want you to mix up the ID and the index of the array. So those are different things. We are not checking for ID. It's going to be more complicated to check for ID. We're not going to do that. We are going to check for which index your mark is in. We're just going to check indices and see if they all have the same mark, right? because that's easier. Yeah, trust me. Let's do the same thing for columns. Check columns. Columns is 0, and then what is that? 0, 3, and 6. I think 6 like this. Right? And then the other one is going to be a 1, 4, 7. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this last one is going to be a 2, 5, 8 columns. Nice. Check diagonals. That would be from the top left, which is 0, to the middle, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, to the bottom, which is 8. And then, of course, the other way around from left to right, upper right, this would be a, this is 8, so that would be a 6, to 4, to 2, 0, 1, 2. So that should be the diagonal. Okay. And now this is the information that we need in order to, I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to make a function that checks. Let's call this all 3 the same. And we are going to accept 3 parameters like field 1 or A and field B and field C. And what we are going to do is just wish for a function that checks if all 3 are the same. This is the function that's going to do that. We are just going to wish for a function that is going to do that. And what we want to do is call this function and just pass it these indices like this. And of course, do that for the second row and the third row like this. And it's going to tell us whether we actually have 3 in a row, which are the same for the first, second, and third row. And the same thing is going to happen for columns. Check 0, check 3, check 6. Do that for the other as well. 7, 4, 1, and 2, 5, and 8. So do that again here for the diagonals. Oops, what I did? Duplicate 2 and 6. Okay, so now we're almost done. We just wished for a function that would check if all 3 in a row or in a column or diagonally are the same. Now we need to implement this function. And it's actually easier than you think. We are going to use something from mathematics. Don't be scared. It's called the transitive property, I think, which basically means that if you say, if one thing is the same thing as another one, and this other thing is the same as a third thing, then what you can follow from that is that A is the same as C. Does that make sense? So if one thing and another thing are the same, and this other thing is equal to a third thing, then that means that the first and third are the same as well. So that's the transitive property or something in mathematics, I think it's called. And we're going to make use of that. How? Well, we're going to do this. We're going to check our field state if whatever we have in our index at field A. Well, actually, it's not. Is it called field? It should be called index, index A. And then as well, index B. And index C. Right? Maybe that makes more sense because we are passing indices in that function. And so parameters should be called something like that as well. Okay, index at A. If that is the same as our field state at index B, right, then we have to check if our field state of index B is also the same as field state at index C, like this. It's a little bit tricky, I know. Stay with me. It's going to make sense. Are these the same? And if they are the same, we are going to return. Actually, we're just going to make this in one line. We are going to return yes or no. So true or false if they are the same. That means we need to somehow catch that in here. Something like, I don't know, maybe a variable that means did win or something. Set to false initially, and then we can have that reassign if this is true or that is true. So we can chain this to be all part of one expression. If either of these rows has the same mark in them, then this is going to be set to true or false otherwise. And we can do the same thing here as well. Let's add some bars here and some bars there. Reformat, nice. Do the same thing here. This is just one way of doing this. Not the most pretty thing to do, but it's okay for now. Okay, so let's check. Check for win. Did we call this already? We did call this already. Okay, so now what we need, and this is something that is, well, maybe not that obvious, but we don't need a state. We don't need another state that determines whether a player won or not. We can use a derived state, which is just plain old simple variable. We can call this did win or something like, oh, we have a did win already. Let's call this win. Very creative. And set this to false, right? And we can use that variable right here, because check for win is a function that we just wrote, which returns true or false depending on whether three marks have been the same, three marks have been set in a row, column, or diagonally. And we are going to, are we? We are not, right? We have to return this right here. We have to return did win as well, because otherwise we're not going to get anything from that function. It's going to be undefined. But now we are returning this state, or like this variable, the variable that we are using as a local variable within check for win, which is going to be returned here, which is where we are going to catch it right there. And now we can display win, let's say here. We can say h2 win. Let's just display win, whether there actually is true or false in it. Refresh. Is it actually going to display anything? What if I say true? It's not going to display. Okay. So if win is true, then display you won. Okay. So let's see. We set this to true. Yeah. So it does display. Very well. Win. Now let's see. We are going to say X here, O here. It actually should have said that we won already, but it didn't. So something didn't quite work the way I would have expected. It's debugging time. We are returning index A equal to B and B equal to C. And we are putting these individually as arguments into that function. Concatenating with an OR, 3 rows, 3 columns, 2 diagonals. So that does make sense to me, to be honest. Why is it not working? We are checking for win. If we continue playing, nothing happens. So it's always false. Is that what you're saying? Make console log and see that it actually is false all the time. Just want to make sure. So it is false initially, makes sense. Then we set X, yep. Then we set O, it's always false. It should have been true now, because, or like, yeah, no. Something's not right. When am I updating my variable win? I'm updating it. I'm actually like, that's the thing about state. Because I am clicking on a button, let's say this one in the middle. The button has an onClick event, which sets, it's calling a function called handle at mark. And what handle at mark does is it sets a state for the field and for the player. And that triggers a re-render in React, which reruns the entire component, and it also recalculates what this variable should be, because it is initially, it is false, but this function is called every time this component is re-rendered, this function gets called, and then win should be recalculated to be something else. I had a warning, really? Oh yeah, you're right. Oopsie. Yeah, we did that previously. We set the key prop to the button, but now that we have a fragment, we need a key here. But we can't place the key just inside of here because that does not work for React. We need to say that this is a fragment and then it's gonna work syntactically. For that, we need to import fragments. And I think it already did. It didn't. Is it going to work still? No, it's not going to work. Yeah, because you need to import it. It's not showing any errors anymore. I wonder why. Because it should tell me that this is not something that it knows what it is because it's not imported yet. So it's kind of weird that I'm not getting any errors. Fragments. I know it's coming from React, so now it's imported and it does show up correctly. Okay. So let's check. What have we missed? Oh, I see. We are running through everything here. So actually, we have a visitor, Milo. Mm, say hi. Say hi. Milo says hi. Mm. Do you want to play tic tac toe? Who's gonna win? You or me? Yeah, I'm actually working. You have to get off table. So I think I spotted the error because we need to make sure that we jump out from our function if this is if this is true, then we don't need to go and look for the other cases because we already know, yeah, there has been one case within those three, for example, that was true. And so we need to quit our function right here, you know, let Milo stay. As long as he's not jumping around on my keyboard, I'm fine. He can come back. He's still here, sitting at the window. Okay, so let's see. How can we do that? If this is true, this is really weird. Like if we say if did win true, the return true. Hmm. Maybe there's a better way of doing it. But I mean, do you understand now why this is happening? Because I think this is the error. We need to quit our function right here and say something like if did win, then we need to return from our function and not execute the other piece of code, which we don't want to execute because it might yield a false, which is eventually like it's false all the time. Wait, hold on. What if rows, columns, and then diagonals? What if I one diagonally like this? This should actually give me a true value. And it didn't. Still weird. Yeah, let's kind of do that. Let's get rid of this variable. We don't need it. I changed my mind. We're going to do something else. We're going to say if, and then this. If any of this is true, that makes more sense. Any of this is true, then we are going to return from this function with a true value, right? That makes more sense syntactically and semantically as well. So if this, any of these expressions are true, we are going to return true. Something like this. And the same thing here. If this, then return true. And otherwise, you just return false. Because you have gone through every possible winning combination, rows, columns, diagonals. And if you haven't returned by now, then we don't have a winner yet. So that I think makes more sense. If we read that 3 days from now, then I hope this is still going to make sense. Let's see. X, X, X. Still nothing. What the? Still something missing. What did I miss? This is so weird. Can you spot the error? I can't for now. Wait. Did we actually check the mark? We didn't. We didn't. We are comparing objects with each other, which of course is going to be false every time. No, we need to make sure that we are comparing the marks inside of them. Duh. That makes sense. It's much more sense. Now, we're not protecting ourselves against mischief. So you could write a function that accesses an index that does not exist. Then yeah, this is going to throw an error because you're going to access a property of something that's undefined, but I'm not going to bother with that now. Let's just say save, and we won. Look at that. Look at that. And initially it says you won as well, because the mark inside of every field right now is the same, actually, because it is undefined for every button. So they are the same effectively, but we don't want that. We want to make sure that field state at that index actually has a value. I'm going to, well, okay, let's do it explicitly. Okay, so if it is not undefined, oopsie, undefined, and let's duplicate this and say for index B, C, the same thing. If whatever is in there is not undefined, right? So we are only going to check these places if there is actually a mark in them. Okay, so we can make this shorter as well by just saying this. If you have a mark, if you have a mark, if you have a mark. So this is going to do the same thing. But like I said earlier, let's make this explicit. It's more readable, especially for beginners. Okay, let's check. X, X, 1. Nice. Isn't that nice? That is nice. Now, we can still keep going. So we need to somehow make sure, maybe we need another point. Let's add another point. Oh, look at that. We can cross this off. We determined a winner. We displayed, okay, we didn't actually display the winner yet, but we are going to soon. Let's add another point and say this is the, make sure to end the game after win. And we haven't done that yet. We somehow need to make sure that we can't place any more marks after some player won, then we can't do anything else. Okay, how do we do that? We are going to use our disabled attribute and extend it to include our win. Because if it is set to true, then someone won. And if it is true, it means it's disabled. Is it that easy? Let's see. Mm-hmm. X1. Now, yeah, we can't place any more marks because win is now true, even if there is no X and O in that field. So these are false, false, but this is true, which makes the entire expression true, and it's disabled whenever you win. Someone wins, X or O. Okay, so that's done. Let's cross that off. X, done. Now, we haven't quite done this one because display the winner, we haven't done that. How can we make sure that we know which player won? We can do something like this. Same expression. Let's make this a template literal and say dynamically. Someone won. If the player... Now, this is a bit tricky as well. Because remember, every time you set a mark, the field updates, the player updates to the next. So if it's been X as turn, then O is going to be next. And if it was O who set the mark, then it's going to be X. And on the next render, this is going to be set to the next player. So if you were the last player, and let's say you were X, right? And you set this mark, then you won. But the next re-render is going to set the player to O. So the current player in our win state is actually O. Does that make sense? We already set the next player, which means if this is O, then we need to say that X won, and otherwise we need to say that O won. See? X1. Let's try this again. Place X here, there. Let's say, let's make O win this time. There you go. O1. See, the current player is X because it's the next player's turn. And we need to invert that winning logic at this point. Try again. Let's make X win, X1. That makes sense. Oh, no, I didn't want this to happen. Do it again. And O1. See? Let's win diagonally. Yes. Diagonal wins. Let's do this the other way around. Win. Nice. What else? Maybe in a column. Yeah. So it does seem to work. Nice. That's one more. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm happy. So it does work. Oh, one. Oh, let's add something else like layer. Layer. Player O1 or player X1. Nice. I'm happy. Are you happy? We only have one more thing to go. The reset button. Let's do this real quick. Let's make a button appear below our playing field and call this restart game. Nope, this is not going to look like this. This is actually... Why is it looking like this anyway? Make a div. Put this in that div. Yeah, looking much better now. And let's... We could actually maybe add a class, call it restart or something. And this is the only time you're going to see me actually write CSS. Let's go to app CSS and let's add a restart class name, and the rule is going to be that I want this height, no, the width. I want this width to be, I don't know, 120. Let's just see what that looks like. Nah, it can go higher. 240. Nice. Let's add a margin. Margin top of, say, 8 pixels. Yeah, maybe more. Yeah, something like that. So now we have a proper reset button. And we can concern ourselves with the logic again, which is way more fun. Let's see. Resetting the entire game means resetting the state of our field, our grid, and the state of our players. So it's two things we need to do. Let's just create a function. Let's add reset game. Okay, we're gonna wish for a function that's called reset game. Let's add this function right here. Oops, let's call this function reset game. And all we need to do is say set field state and set it to, well, that's going to be easy, initial grid. Right. Why? Because it didn't change. Initial grid stayed the same through all this time. This never changed. Remember, we passed this as our initial state to this state variable, and all the changes happened to this state variable. They did not happen to the original initial grid array, which is important to know, or important to understand how React works. And additionally, this is placed outside the function component, which means it's going to stay the same anyway. So if you re-render the component like 1,000 times because you're always setting state, this is never rerun. This is only run once, then it stays the same, which is a cool and handy thing for us because we can just set this to initial grid and we're going to have an empty field again. And we're going to set the player to X because that was the first player anyway. X here, X there. And if you wanted to have something more constant as well, then you could say initial player is X if you want, and you can pass this as initial state here as well, and at this point. So that way you don't have to make a change at two places. You only have it. You need to make a change here if you want to make the initial player O. So it's just one change in one line. So that would work as well. So let's see, how does that work? We can play a game, we can win a game, we can restart the game. Look at that. Nice. We can even reset a game mid-game. So we don't have to end it, we can just restart. Which I think is okay. For some reason, if we decide we want to start over, then we can, which is great. And I think we're done. Check this off and happy. Celebrate. Nice. Yeah, it's quite a bit. So the winning logic probably is the most complicated thing to understand or to come up with by yourself, which is why you watched this tutorial and didn't have to think about this yourself. You could just lean back and see if you can understand it by, yeah, following along, which I hope you could. Man, that was quite long. I didn't anticipate this to be almost 1.5 hours. I thought like maybe half an hour and we're done. I actually wanted to code up rock, paper, scissors as well, but that's gonna be another 1.5 hours, I'm afraid. So let's call this a night. Let's call this a session, and maybe I'll do this again. Maybe the other day, tomorrow, the day after. Yeah, let's code up rock, paper, scissors next time. That was Tic Tac Toe. And if you want to have the code, I do have a repository which already has the entire code that we just wrote. Is already done and finished here. I can put the link in the description. You can check it out by going to pull requests and inspecting like everything. Come on. Let's make this. Oh, you probably can't see this properly. Excuse me. So yeah, but you can inspect the entire code. Every change that I made, you can find it in here. So just if you want to have a copy, you can grab one here. You can fork it if you like. And the same thing for rock, paper, scissors. But we're going to code this another time. Great. So thanks for tuning in. And good night. Have a good day. See ya.